Hi, okay, just a quick lecture about reference material. It's really important that you collect as much reference material as you can. I've got a SLR camera and I went out into a local forest and I took a lot of pictures of trees and plants and ground. And if you can do that, then it's probably a good thing to do. In fact, if whatever you're modeling, whether it's old fantasy castles, go out and take pictures of walls and old ancient structures and things, just to get some sort of reference and feeling of what they're made of and how they're constructed, and really look at the things that you're trying to build. So as we're moving on to trees now in the next lecture, I thought I'd just give a quick overview of the things that I've got here, the things that I've collected. And so the first thing we're going to do is big old oak trees. I'm going to do one big oak tree, and I'm going to let you, after we've done the first one, create the second one, because there's two there next to the hut. And then we're going to move on to more generic trees that we're going to use to populate the rest of the environment. So one of the features of the big oak tree is the roots. Now, I went out and took a lot of pictures of trees and a lot of literal roots, because it's quite important to get the base of the trees right. This is just a bunch of photographs from near where I live, and I just wanted to show you how, when you create trees in Unity and you plot them onto the ground, they just go straight in, and it's not convincing to me. You look at the more AAA games and they're really well constructed. They've got roots, and the ground is lifted slightly where the roots have pushed the earth up, and when you see it, it just works and it looks fantastic. You may not necessarily know why it looks fantastic, because nature has a way. You just accept nature, and that's what we're going to try and get across in our scene. So you can see this tree here. Well, this looks like some animal has been gnawing at that, but you see the way the roots come down and they go across the top of the ground slightly and then disappear into the earth. I mean, even ones like this, where some of it sort of, even when it does go straight down, the earth comes up to meet it. Like, you get all this moss coming off the ground and then creeping up the tree, and it just blends. It blends with the earth, and you've got this nice root going into the ground here. And when I took these pictures, I went out on a sort of a diffuse day, so it was quite cloudy. Obviously, in the springtime. The reason why I did a cloudy sort of day was it diffused the photos, because sometimes you can use these as textures in your art, or actually onto models if you modify them. So they're quite useful sometimes. You definitely use these in concept art, for example. I mean, look at that. That's a fantastic tree, and the roots just come out of the ground and go in all directions there. And again, so you can feel that there's a big old ball of roots underneath the ground here. Really interesting, more interesting to look at than just a straight bunch of polygons going into the ground. So, I mean, this is what we're going to create. A lot more interesting shapes. See the shape of that? It's not round. Do you know what I mean? And I don't know what's going on with that tree, but I thought it looked really cool. It's a bit twisted, a bit deformed, I would say, almost. I mean, we won't be creating ones like that, but that's cool. And that was really nice. I thought it was quite cool, just a V tree there. Yes, I thought it'd be interesting to take some pictures of trees on a bank, on a slope, and they do go straight up, just referencing. And the sun came out there, so nice twisty tree there, and that is just fantastic. And it's really good reference when we do the branches to see how branches form on trees. It starts off with a thick trunk, and then the branches get thinner, and then the smaller branches get even thinner, and then the stalks of the leaves get thinner. So you've got this sort of like thinning, narrowing getting smaller as it gets up and out to the leaves. It's just really good to understand how things grow, and that's just great. That's a lot more interesting. Look at that down there, those roots sort of on the ground there. I took that picture because it was quite interesting. It's sort of on the water almost, which is quite nice. So, you know, just a bunch of, I mean, that's great. I do think that's an oak tree. I'm not entirely sure. I did take a lot of pictures. Now that is what we're looking for our big tree. We're going to do something like this, maybe even more slightly exaggerated than that. You know, so they come down and quite big and gnarly and droop down off the side of the hill or the side of the slope that we've got in our Unity terrain. But that's what I'm after when we do our big oak trees. So we're going to do something like this. See, and these are really good reference. Look at the way that moss is growing on the tree at the bottom. We're going to create that in our textures when we get to texture it. And that is fantastic. That's a good looking oak tree. A good looking tree with some decent roots there going into the ground. And look at the way the earth pulls the earth up. It's like a little mound there of earth. And it's just a mass of roots underneath that ground. And that's the feeling you want to get that across. So it's got this sort of sloping up, this arc that goes up. It's really nice. And again, another really interesting looking tree here. Not quite sure what these things are, but still it's a nice little feature. And again, all the moss growing up the tree, we'll get that across in our, well, actually all the lichen here that's growing. You know, really look at the details. Don't just get a bark texture and slap it on and there you go, it's done. Look at the detail, because it's the detail that makes the difference. And that's just great. And that's obviously another part of the tree that used to grow and has been sawn off for some reason. This is a managed forest. It's actually, you know, they do take good care of it. So that's probably something that went wrong or died or something. And it's an interesting root growing out of the ground there and looping over another root and disappearing into the earth. So really interesting little features. And this picture was interesting because we could do this as well. So you see this a lot in forests where the roots sort of come up out of the ground and then go under and come up, and you know, all around this area this was growing. It's obviously coming from this tree here and spidering out from the roots. So really nice. And there we are, back to the start again. So I'll show you some of the other things that I collected. Yeah, a couple of rocks. I just saw these rocks and thought, oh, they're interesting. You know, some more rocks by a stream there. So you can see it's in my Art of Games TAG Raw project files reference. I've created a reference folder in here. I've put all this in here. Ground, some paths here. So, and what was interesting about this is you can see the way the tree, you know, this is obviously a path that's been cleared through the forest, whether I don't think it's naturally, but you know, there's not where people walk, there's not a lot of stuff growing, and the further into the forest you go, the taller it gets, you know, so it's like nothing, short, longer, you know, even longer bushes and bigger trees, you know, so it goes up in a sweeping motion away from the paths, and that's really interesting. And you'll see that everywhere. There's another picture of the same. And I took some photos of the ground. Literally, you can sometimes use these as textures, but my camera only does 2K textures, so I need to upgrade it. So these aren't quite big enough. So it's 1920 by 1080. But you know, if that's good enough, 1K texture, you could crop this and put it in Photoshop, get it tiling, and block out all these obvious marks so it's not too repetitive when it tiles on your floor. And we're going to do that. We're going to do that when we collect our images for our floor when we texture it in Unity. But you've got to get rid of all the repetition, obvious chunks, and these things here would be obvious. If you saw that tiled, it would just stick out like a sore thumb. Some pictures of twigs and cones on the ground. You know, when you come to doing your little debris, you could create a few of these and scatter them around. Just some features where these plants go across the path there. Yeah, see, that's a good image because it's quite clean. You know, if you sort of squint, there's nothing that really sticks out. Maybe this, whatever that is, and these white, brighter spots. Even that you could Photoshop out these green spots. I mean, if you want the green spots, you would put another texture on top of it. You wouldn't use, you know, you wouldn't keep that in because it would just be everywhere. But yeah, you could easily crop that. That would make a nice tiled texture. And same again, obviously these big bits we can Photoshop out. I'll show you to do that because that's a technique you need to learn, and there's a particular way you need to do it so it's not obvious that you've painted on, you've painted on top of it. So more paths. So I just collected a lot of some close-up of a pine cone. Just thought I'd see what the structure of that was. Maybe you can model one of those. These are all my own pictures, that's why I can show you all of these. And lots of ground plants. Yeah, lots of ferns. We're going to be creating lots of ferns because they're quite prevalent in a forest. Well, they were in the forest that I went to, lots of them. Some of these leaves we can cut out and use on our actual plants themselves. And that's quite satisfying when you've taken a picture, you've cleaned it up, and you're actually using it in your art. It's actually knowing that it's come from the real world. It's pretty cool. More fern reference, and notice these ferns, how they grow. They're green obviously, but they get lighter on the tips, some of them. And we need that detail in our art. Some of them are like frizzy and brown on the edges as well, and you see that quite a lot if you look at them. And there's just a whole mass of them. They get really big as well. Some of these were up to my sort of chest height, up these ones here. So they get pretty big, some of these. And we want them to look big. It's just various plants, various ground plants. Those are quite cool because they're glossy. I'm not quite sure what sort of plant they are, but we can easily find that out. These are nettles. I don't know if you get these in where you live, but they're quite they're everywhere in Northern Europe. And if you touch these, they hurt. They sting. So I advise you not to touch them, but you can actually cook these and eat them. Nettle soup, I've seen. They're called stinging nettles because they sting and they do hurt. So yeah, various reference materials, leaves. So these are leaves I've actually focused in on. So this is an oak leaf. So when we do our oak tree, these are the kinds of leaves we're going to be having on it. To try to get a really nice sharp image, because I might try and create, cut that out and actually use it in our artwork. And if I'm successful, if we do that, I'll post it so you can use it too. Again, some fern leaves. Now these are okay, but they got shadow on them, so it's quite hard to get rid of that when you try and paint them out. So I'm not sure if I'll be able to use these. Got closer. That's an easier one to clean up if you want to use that. Same again, it's a different one. More oak leaves. I just took lots of leaves, got lots of reference for leaves. And it's not just for reference, it's like identifying what type of plants you'd find in the forest that you're creating. So if you're creating a jungle, for example, you wouldn't find these types of plants in a jungle. So it's important that you get your vegetation right, or it won't look right, basically. These are interesting because they're quite small. The leaves look the leaves are smaller than my thumb now, so they could look quite quite a good variation of an obvious difference to any other plant in your forest. So that's leaves. What else have we got here? Yeah, trees and branches, general trees and branches. Some of them are absolutely enormous. That was a really cool picture, I thought, of some pine trees, a lot of pine trees. And we'll create some of these. These are pretty easy to create. And that was interesting. Had a sort of kink halfway up. You know, these are what makes it interesting, basically. Lots of pine trees. You know, lots of nice, interesting shapes of trees, and you can see what I was saying before. The branches come out and they get thinner and thinner as they get further and further out. You know, that's a silver birch. We'll be making one of those. You know, but it's all in the textures, most of it, and the size. They've got to be the right sort of size and shape for the type of tree you're creating, and the leaves obviously make all the difference. More silver birch. That was quite an interesting shape. And I took a picture of the sort of sunlight coming through the leaves, and you know, some of these leaves are sort of not see through them, but I mean, look at this light here. You can see the light through it, and I'm trying to achieve that. But it's, you know, like I say, it's all in the detail, and this sort of sun haze through the trees is quite nice. Yeah, just a bunch of trees, and how they sit in the forest and against the sky. And these are really cool. These could be quite interesting to create. Sort of spidery looking trees. I'm not quite sure what type they are, but we can find that out, I'm sure. But it's a good reference. You know, coming across that would certainly be a good sort of landmark, a good point of interest. You'd remember it if you had a clump of those. Because I only saw one lot of this. If you had a clump of those in your forest, then you'd remember where you were, you know, in relation to everything else. Oh, there's a little squirrel looking at me as I took that picture. Yeah, so I just took a lot of interesting pictures of trees. I think some really good oak trees here somewhere. Now that was really cool. I like that tree. Some sort of pine tree there. And same one again. Now these are the oak trees. Look at these. I love oak trees. They're so, you just get a sense of oldness. You know, ancient. These things are ancient, hundreds of years old. It's obviously been managed over the years. You can see branches have been chopped off because there was a path here, so it's obviously came out over the path and they chopped it off, and again here chopped it off. Just managing the forest, which is a bit of a shame, but it's you know. There we go. This is the tree. It's great tree. It's another one, interesting looking. Yeah, it's trees, all good. So the point of this is, you know, learn your subject matter. What you're creating adds so much detail into your work, and the way the light hits it, the way the shapes of them, why they're like that, you know, the way they grow. Even though there's a commonality through all these trees in that they grow up, they grow thinner as they get to the top. The branches thin out, and the leaves, you know, right out to the leaves, and the tips of the leaves, all, you know, to nothing. So all trees are like that. So there's a commonality there, but you get all these really interesting shapes. So there we are. That's the reference. So the point is, go out, get your reference, and that's it. So let's move on. Let's build some trees.